Okay, and we should have heard that recording in progress. So please note the webinar is being recorded. If you object, then you are welcome to leave. So a very warm good afternoon to everyone. My name is Tony Parry, Institute of IT Professionals of South Africa. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all to this Cybersecurity Awareness Month event, which is hosted by the Cybersecurity Special Interest Group, shortened to SIGCyber, of the Institute. I welcome every delegate, and especially would like to welcome Mr. Craig Rosewarne from Wolfpack Risk, who is our guest speaker this afternoon. Craig, thank you so much for joining us and being available to make your time and your knowledge available and shared with us. I'd also like to thank and welcome Brian Baxter, Professor Lynn Futcher, Professor Kerry Lynn Thompson, both the profs from Nelson Mandela University in Port Elizabeth or Gqeberha, and thank them for their involvement in setting this up and making sure it all happens. Brian Baxter, the current SIG chair, will chat to you in a minute or two. So again, a warm welcome. I know people are still joining, and just a reminder that October is Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It would be interesting to know in a minute or three how many of you on the call actually work in or with cybersecurity in your day jobs. If you maybe just say I do, or put a thumbs up or something, we'd be interested to see how many of you actually do that. So it is now gone 4 o'clock. I know people are still joining, but we are very mindful of time. It is already, excuse me, Thursday afternoon. And I don't want to keep people longer than they need to be kept, although I know Craig has got a lot of really interesting stuff to share. And for those who are going to ask the question, he is willing very kindly to share his slides, so we don't need to ask that question, it's answered already. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Brian Baxter, who's the current chair, as I mentioned, of our special interest group on cybersecurity. And Brian will also introduce our special guest speaker. So thank you, Brian, and thank you to the team, Prof. Lynn, Prof. Kerry Lynn, and all others. We appreciate what you're doing for the Institute. To all the delegates, sit back and enjoy.
Thank you, Tony. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can hear us clearly and that the communications are all working well. So I'm just going to give a very short welcome. I'm going to introduce Craig and then let Craig get on with it. So yeah, thank you to everyone for joining. Thank you for the team that put this together. I think we all share the same passions, and it's quite important to learn about the things we're going to encounter now. So just a little bit about Craig. Craig is well known and an influential thought leader in the South African cybersecurity market. And what's very interesting is that he shares the IITPSA SIGCyber's passion for fostering a sense of cooperation for the greater good in our community, promoting an understanding of the cybersecurity domain, awareness of the threats we are facing and how to take action, making a difference at individual, company, and national level. And if we look at the state of cybersecurity, if we look at our particular situation in our country, it is all very so a bit on Craig. He's got over 20 years management experience in the field of oversight on about 600 plus projects in those domains. He's proudly South African and even prouder husband and father to 3 healthy cubs, as he calls them, or his kids. He's the MD of Wolfpack Information Risk, which was established in 2011. And the purpose of the company is to assist countries, companies, and communities to defend themselves against cyber threats. He also founded Alert Africa in 2015 to provide pro bono awareness resources and assistance to victims of cyber crime and harassment. And that little initiative, I know, has taken many hours of effort and long hours and lots of time and effort and resources putting all that together. He's also an author, instructor, keynote presenter, and provides regular opinion pieces in the media. And you can see some examples there. And I always enjoy reading his articles or seeing him on TV. And as you can see, he's got some very good qualifications, some very specialist qualifications in the cybersecurity field. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Craig. I hope everybody enjoys, and please feel free to put questions which we can monitor and address thereafter.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you, Tony, and greetings, everyone. Good to be here. Got some very important things to share, less so from a work point of view, but also from a protecting your own finances and protecting your family at the end of the day. So probably two of the most important assets that you've worked hard to nurture. I'm going to just quickly share my screen. And right. All right, so let me dive straight into it. This is what I'm going to be covering today. I think it's important that we understand the threat landscape that we are dealing with. And you'll see now, normally when we speak, we either talking to companies or we're talking to governments at a national level, for example, or we're talking to the community in terms of families or non-profits, etc. So today's one, as I said, is going to be very focused on protecting the family. What we're going to do is I'm going to touch very highly on an initiative that we've been passionately involved in called Alert Africa for the last 7 or 8 years. And that's really our giving back to the community in terms of dealing with cybercrime. And a lot of the lessons that we've got out of that, I'm going to be sharing actual criminal incidents that we've investigated, things that are happening right here in South Africa, how they take place, etc. And some quite devious, quite clever things that are happening. Second part of that is to actually step aside from a cybersecurity point of view and talk about something. If you have got teenagers, whether they're your own children or you're a guardian to them, or maybe you've got a partner that doesn't know how to manage device time, I'm going to be sharing some very, very key lessons learned through the trenches. And I promise you, there's no easy way of doing this, even though there are tools. I'll talk about some of the tools that can help you. But at the end of the day, it's a challenge, and just some guidance in terms of dealing with especially your teenagers and managing devices in a better way. So that's really what I've got. Just a little bit of a warning. Normally, when I do physical presentations in front of people, I would normally do quite a bit of demonstrations and show things. There might be 1 or 2 things that I do share today that might be, a bit upsetting to people that are quite sensitive. So just a little warning about that. All right, but you shouldn't faint, or you shouldn't, break out in a screaming or panic attack. It's not going to be that bad, but just putting it out there. All right, so thanks once again, IITPSA, for doing this. Thanks for recording it. I think the more people that can get this sort of message out there, the better. So it's all part of spreading awareness. One slide about who we are, so you can understand the context. I founded the company about 11 years ago off the back of working at Deloitte, etc. And really my passion for doing this, and hence of choosing the name of Wolfpack, was really to look at, strength in numbers, protection in the pack, collaboration, working together, etc., and passing down knowledge. And that's really what the core essence of the organization is about. And I always talk about the 4 legs of the table. And one of those legs is our cyber safety element, which is the community part of things. We used to have it as a separate thing. Now it's very much integrated into our business, and we're very passionate about that. Just before I dive into the actual community side of things, for those of you, I think it's also quite relevant, because we do a fair amount of work at a government level as well, just to highlight for you. 2 things that are very exciting at a national level is, one is there's currently a very substantial cybersecurity, cybercrime training program on the go in our country. We're very privileged to be part of that in terms of helping to train up people that are going to be dealing with prosecuting cybercrime, that are going to be investigating cybercrime. That's the one thing. Typically a 3-year program that's been earmarked. And the nice thing is it's coming out, is getting paid for by the proceeds of cybercrime, or proceeds of crime, actually, to combat crime. So cybercrime being a subset of the bigger crime picture. And the second thing at a national level is we busy working with our government to develop a national cybersecurity framework that's going to be common across all. We're talking about critical infrastructure and government, but at this point in time, we're focusing more on government. And that's something that's going to be coming down the line soon as well. So also excited about about that element as well. So I just thought I'd mention that for those of you that work closely with government. You can have a chat here, so we'll give you a bit more insight into that. But our focus for today is going to be very, very much around cyber safety. All right, so let's dive straight into that. So where are we in terms of this thing called cyber, whether we're talking about cyber crime, whether we're talking about cyber defense, cyber intelligence, etc. At the end of the day, the cyber threat landscape is something that affects us all. And it affects us in three ways. One being whether we are dependent, and we all are dependent on critical infrastructure. I mean, we all know the effects of when Eskom goes down, how it impacts us, when water goes down. And these are going down not necessarily due to cyber attacks, but due to maintenance or other issues, all right, or sometimes sabotage, for example. But we know if you want to bring a country down to its knees, you hit its critical infrastructure. And we're seeing these sort of attacks being launched on a global scale across different entities. Today's talk is not about that, so I'm not going to go into that level of detail. The second element is companies. Obviously, companies are being targeted, mostly for financial gain or industrial espionage, for example. And the common two links in both of those elements, the common weakest link in both of those is the people element, which is the third part of the puzzle, which is community. And that's you and me. That's us and our families. So in each of these three cases, oftentimes individuals are targeted or threatened to provide access to information or systems, for example, or are hacked or compromised to gain access to a country's critical infrastructure or to target an organization. So this part of awareness is critical in all three spheres of life that we exist in. All right. And I think just to give without assuming knowledge, etc., but just so that when I talk about different terms, we're all on the same page. So whether you are targeting critical infrastructure, whether you're targeting a company, whether you're targeting an individual, for example, the same principles apply. Different tools, different asset values, etc., but similar principles apply. And yeah, we talk about a threat actor. Threat actor, and if I use the example of your house, all right, your house contains various assets in them, money, TV, your family, for example, that are very, very valuable to protect, all right? There are threat actors out there. In this case, it could be a burglar that wants to get their grubby paws on those assets, all right? And in order to do that, they're going to do reconnaissance on your place. They're going to look at what type of threat action, what type of exploit they're going to be using. They're going to look at what weakness you've got in your home. So maybe your house, in this case, doesn't really have much security at all. There might be minimal burglar guards. There's no dog. There's no CCTV camera, for example. There's no armed response. And because your house seems to be the weakest on the block, you're going to get hit if your assets are worth it. So, of course, we have to bolster our defenses in terms of managing these vulnerabilities so that we've got a stronger defense to, we've got to put in the right level of assets to protect, a right level of controls to protect our assets. That's at the end of the day, the terms that we are utilizing, all right? And when we look at the bigger picture, so we see that, typically facing any company, facing any critical infrastructure, facing any individual, there's going to be various threat actors. And broadly speaking, there are two segments. One, that which is external, all right? And whether it's a nation state, whether it's a terrorist group, whether it is an organized crime syndicate, there's different motivations that these guys would have. So a terror group is very much interested in terms of intelligence gathering, causing physical damage, for example, right? So that's typically where they would play. Organized crime is very much focused on financial gain, for example. A hacktivist in an organization typically belongs to a cause, all right, whether it's religious, environmental, etc., and they are very much focusing on causing reputational harm to the entity at the end of the day. All right, and so we can carry on. So typically we have external threats, and oftentimes there's intentional or malicious, or there's unintentional or non-malicious, all right, that is the motivations. The scary side, on the other side of the coin, is the internal threat. And once again, we have intentional and we have unintentional. In most companies, the companies you work for, a large percentage, majority by far, of the people in that organization are good people, all right? And there it's more about unconscious errors, maybe people in IT, for example, that are doing misconfigurations or not patching things properly, or a la Eskom equipment failure due to non-maintenance, etc. But there's also a small pocket of people, whether they're unhappy about being missed out for promotion or disgruntled ex-employees, and they become malicious, and they've got access to credentials, they've got access to assets that they take advantage of. All right. So, and these things happen at 3 different levels that we operate in. One being at what's called the surface web. This is what we are used to using in terms of social media, cloud storage, cloud tools, etc. All right. The other one happens at another layer called the deep web. Nothing malicious about that. That's very much your internal systems, file servers, etc., where that information typically shouldn't be publicly accessible. But the last portion happens on this element over here called the dark web. Although it's the smallest part at this point in time, it's growing, and it's increasingly being used by malicious actors over here in terms of stealing information or trading of services or goods, etc. as well. All right, and I'll touch on that very, very briefly just now in the family section. All right, so I think that just gives you a quick overview in terms of some of the terms I'll be throwing around. Folks, if you've got any questions, please do fire them off to the chat. I'm not going to stop the talk to answer questions. At the end, we'll have a Q&A session. If there's any sensitive questions, you're welcome to fire them off to myself directly, and then I'll get a team member to assist you with that. So let's quickly talk about protecting families. I just wanted to touch base on something that we are doing called Alert Africa. Alert Africa was initially funded by the British government as a project in South Africa through us about 8 years ago. We've funded it and managed it since. And Alert Africa, as its name says, it's all about securing our continent together as a community. All right. We really wanting to grow this and join hands with other organizations or other entities, and IITPSA would be a great partner in this space as well. And so what are we focusing on? So it's all about assisting that part of our country, our community, that no one's really looking after. So that's really us in our individual state. You know, if any of you fall victim to cyber criminals, unfortunately, the options are very, very limited. You can go and report it to the police station, which you're encouraged to do, but at this point in time, they're not properly equipped to deal with the issue. And once again, it becomes like the looting that happened in July of last year. It's a community coming together to try and sort things out, all right? So what we provide is a couple of things. One is we provide cyber survival guides, and these are based on various topics. So whether it's bullying, whether it's phishing attacks, whether it's identity theft, we give you guidance and try and prevent you from falling victim. But if you do fall victim, we tell you about what your rights are, what steps of action that we recommend that you do. All right. So there's these bullying guides. All the stuff, by the way, everything on Alert Africa is free of charge. The services and the goods that we provide are free of charge. We've got no issues about sharing or distributing these to anyone. All right. The second thing, which was another project we did about a year and a half ago with the British government as well as our Department of Communications and university or two, was we actually brought out the Cybersecurity Awareness Toolkit. And I'm going to just show you one slide on that a bit afterwards. But really, it's a beautiful piece of work, if I say so myself. You spent a lot of time on it, and it's freely available. I'll unpack what there is that you can download and use. So if you're involved in education, if you're involved in a school body and you're looking for something, please help yourself. Then the last thing we do is, you know, should the proactive awareness fail, we then help victims of cybercrime. All right, and out of here comes the stories that we tell when we do these type of sessions, or when we come and talk at a company to the staff of an organization. Okay, we do these sessions on a regular basis, and this also feeds into our awareness that we push out to try and make people aware of what is going on. So it's very relevant. It's very South African focused. Just to give you the one slide quickly on the school cyber safety toolkit. So these are the different topics that we created. You'll see it's very much around the broader cyberspace, how to use cyberspace safely. It's also then around people. People use devices, okay? On those devices, they've got apps. And on those apps, for example, there's information that is shared. So very, very relevant topics that we've done. We did quite a bit of research around it as well. So we brought out quite a big research paper around the current state in South Africa. and then a lot of content. So the content, for example, is posters, cartoons, word searches, a whole lot of other things like pledges and mascots. We created what's called the Cyber Cadets, and the Cyber Cadets are very representative of different genders, different races in the country. We also included people with disabilities, for example, as well. So the general, for example, is blind, and I can't remember the other lady's name, but she's got super mind powers, but she's in a wheelchair, and other people have other special powers as well. So it relates very much to children. There's videos, there's games, there's workbooks. Now, out of interest, the workbooks, the first workbook and the posters, for example, we actually got done in different languages as well. So, you know, it's English, Afrikaans, isiZulu, Xhosa, South Sotho, and Venda. I did a talk yesterday morning to the government of Lesotho, who are looking at ramping out a whole lot of things. And, you know, those three languages, South Sotho, Xhosa, and isiZulu, and English, are the four main languages of Lesotho. So it's actually perfect. They can take it as it is and roll with it. All right, so please bear that in mind. You're welcome to reach out, and we'll give you full access to the toolkit. Okay, gratis, free of charge. So folks, let me focus on those two elements now that I want to dive into. One around cybercrime tactics, and the other around device management. Okay, so the first one now is very much around, and I'm going to use it a little bit tongue-in-cheek, so please don't take this the wrong way, but I do it to try and get a point across. So, you know, saying to the aspiring criminal, you know, that's out there, if you're wanting to start up a cybercrime business, typically what would you do? You know, the first thing being, if you think about starting a normal business, you've got to create your business plan, select a business model, how you're going to, you know, deal with business to business, business to customers, how you're going to find business, etc. How you're going to monetize the business. The second part is all about, you know, it's all about ducking and diving and creating fake identities, performing reconnaissance on your target. All right, and the last part is launching your tech, the various tools and techniques that are used out there. All right, so as I said, there's actual cases that we've investigated in South Africa. So, you know, when it comes to selecting your business case, and as I said to you, often when we do talks to groups of people, etc., we try and get quite visual in showing things. You know, so the first category is probably the level one. You know, quick money, and you don't need much skills and tools and techniques for that. It's really just following a simple plan, etc. But what we use there to explain that is we use I'm going to try and put it in front of the camera. Use a sucker, all right. And on the sucker is a sticker, and the sticker says, don't be tier one, don't be a sucker when it comes to scams. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. All right. And there, for example, we see cases around fake lotteries. You know, I'll just talk very quickly on a couple of these points. You know, one case where we did an interview with E-News, not E-News, the lady who came to me just now, ex-lady that was on Carte Blanche, the Devi show, for example. We've done a few interviews with her. One lady that went on the Devi show was a financial manager lady, quite a humble lady, but she got suckered into this whole European lottery thing, and she ended up losing about 800,000 Rand, of which she borrowed 500,000 Rand from her brother. And you can think and say, well, how can she be so silly to do, you know, to do this sort of thing? People always say that in hindsight, but when you look at what was sent to her, and there was a whole crew that was playing this lady, sending fake documents from the EU, having to pay lawyers' fees. They even went down the road of sending her a Barclays card, okay, not an FNB card, a Barclays card with her name on it. And when she went into an ATM to go and draw out her money, they gave her the card as a POC. She, you know, there was $5 basically loaded onto the card. So there's a whole syndicate working behind this with the script that they follow, for example. All right, crypto, dodgy investments, anything from chicken farms to, oh man, you name it. I can give you a whole list of different things in terms of all these different things where these things have been pushed out. Very convincing websites, etc. Even things like classifieds, everything from buying and selling or buying puppy dogs online, where they scam people out of, you know, quite substantial amounts of money, to fake car dealerships, etc. All right, so the whole modus operandi is all about getting rich quick money. You know, unfortunately, many people still fall victim to these things. The second category is all about love, okay? And the word love, whether it's love, romance, or sex that you are looking for. There, for example, when we do little talks and we hand out things, we use the XXX mints, XXX mints, and we've got a sticker on there that says, for example, think before you share XXX content on the internet. Avoid romance and sextortion scams. Okay, and there, for example, you know, you've probably heard about the sextortion scams where either a guy or a girl, a younger person, a real sexy, good-looking person reaches out to you, and after a few days of chatting and making you feel good about yourself, they start to share explicit pictures and encourage you to do the same, which you do because you want to get to the next chapter of what they're going to be sharing with you. But lo and behold, you're dealing with someone. Typically, we see these operators operating out of Congo or out of West Africa, Nigeria, etc. as well. All right. Romance, sugar daddy, very much. If you guys have watched the Tinder swindler, for example, just wiping a girl or a guy off their feet. One poor lady that we helped, it was too late. We couldn't really help her, but we dealt with the after effects. I'll share a picture just now of the guy that actually reached out to her, but she ended up selling her business, selling her flatlet, her car, her jewelry for someone that she's never ever met. All right, these things are real, and apart from losing all the money, they have their hearts broken. And these guys are professionals. They know exactly how to sweet talk, whether it's a sugar daddy chasing a young girl or whether it's a pretty girl chasing a man, for example. And then, of course, very extreme cases of harassment and stalking, for example. So this harassment and stalking is all around, you know, it could be an ex-boyfriend or someone that met someone, and really horrible things that end up happening to mostly to ladies at the end of the day, or young girls. Okay, so really, really not nice at all. And you know, when it starts happening to your child as well, in terms of cyberbullying, etc., also falls into that category. And I don't know about you guys, but we're seeing quite a few suicides happening in our country. You know, in my kids' school, there's been one suicide and one attempted suicide this year already with people in high school, young teenagers. Where the big money is to be made, and for big money, we have this fake $100 bill. Try and move it to the camera, which is actually a serviette. All right, it looks quite realistic, but it's serviette for wiping your mouth at the end of the day with all the money that you've made off your victims. And yeah, for example, we see cases like ransomware, big money, big damage being caused by ransomware attacks against organizations. Business email compromise, also incredibly damaging. Business email compromise, for those that are not sure, is really where oftentimes, and we helped a school about 1.5 years ago, you know, where parents pay their school fees in advance to save money, where they get a 10% discount, where they take their bonus and pay. The syndicate actually had infiltrated the school's email system, and they had created a rule: anytime the word statement, invoice, payment, whatever was mentioned, an email copy of that email got sent to a Gmail account that was loaded into the system. And then that scammer then started targeting those parents that made inquiries, pretending to be the school, sent the invoice with their banking details, and lo and behold, 6 parents lost a full year's worth of school fees to these criminals. The same thing happens when you're buying or selling a property, for example, targeting your suppliers, etc. My wife works for a charity. The one lady actually authorized or made the payment. All my wife had to do was go and approve the payment. And luckily, she turned things up. It was actually payment to their supplier, their biggest supplier, for a good few $100,000, which would cripple this little charity. Okay. Hacking, typically going after intellectual property or going after credentials. So that's where we're seeing the large-scale data breaches taking place. And often there's a third party linked to the incident as well. All right, so those are the typical business models that are followed, right? So as part of that, any one of these, this step needs to take place: creating a fake identity and then performing reconnaissance on your target victim. I'm going to do something quick that I need you guys. It's a bit of an interaction, right? I want you guys to have a look at this picture. Now stare, without taking your eyes off, stare at that red dot on this lady's nose. And I'm going to count down for 10 seconds. Don't take your eyes away. 10, 9, 8, keep staring at it, 7, 6, and once I finish counting down, you're going to look up at the ceiling and you're going to blink your eyes slowly and see what happens. 5, 4, keep staring, 3, 2, 1. Now I'm also doing it as well. You might see something quite creepy on your ceiling if it worked for you. If not, when I send out the slides, you can do it in your own comfort. Basically, what you're seeing there is an optical illusion that just took place now, right? And criminals use a very similar modus operandi in terms of a cyber illusion, all right? This is the wonderful gentleman, disgraced to the name. Well, he's using the name as the surname, but the criminals, that lady that I spoke about that lost 5 million rand, was approached by this fine, upstanding gentleman who claimed to be a successful businessman living in Cape Town. All right. And, you know, in today's world, many people know that you can, if you receive a picture of something and you bit suspect, you can go and do a lookup on Google. All right. We do a reverse image lookup, for example, on Google, and that will show you where that image was used before. Or if you're wanting to use a more advanced, there's a tool called PIM-Eyes, for example, and it will show where this picture came up before. And this gentleman was actually a real estate person in South America. All right, so nothing to do with South Africa, but of course they used his image. Sextortion, for example, they will use images as well of pictures that they took off the internet, whether they're porn pictures or model images, for example, in terms of luring the target. So that's where the images come from, all right? You know, if it's quite hard work being a criminal and thinking of creating, you know, all the hard work and trying to figure out and create a fake identity, for example. You know, they always say there's a tool or there's an app for that. And in this case, for example, there's a number of different tools that are out there. There's something called a fake name generator, for example. So now you are wanting to go into the love racket and try your hand at extorting money out of people, males, for example. That's your target market, right? You always got to define your target market as part of creating a business. So in this case, you can go in and say, I want to create an identity of a female, and she must be of French origin and living in South Africa. There's actually advanced options that you can open up that gives you a lot more details as well. And this thing goes out and creates this identity for you. So yeah, you have Madeleine Leclerc. That's where she lives, for example. There's an ID number for her. In this case, you know, you can advanced options. You can set her age range between 20, 25. This one's a bit older, for example. It also even gives you right down to a burner email account. This is a live email that you can actually use in terms of communicating with your victims. All right. But, you know, whilst it's great to create an identity, what it doesn't give you is it doesn't give you that. And based on what I just showed you, you don't want to go and download pictures and get caught out. So you want to create a 100% original picture. All right. So once again, luckily there's a website for that. There's a site that uses artificial intelligence called This Person Does Not Exist. And at the refreshing of the website every time, it creates 100% new picture. These people do not exist. They are 100% created by artificial intelligence, by a computer. So you can create your pictures and find the profile of someone that you want, and that can become your profile picture. You know, and there's a whole range of other things that people can use in terms of creating their profile pictures. All right. The other thing now to bear in mind is if you're wanting to impersonate someone, or if you're wanting to track someone, once again, and these are normally very effective demonstrations that I would do in a public gathering, for example. I'm sure you guys know that, you know, email impersonations are quite easy to do. I can send an email out as anyone's email account. And of course, if you reply to that email, it doesn't come back to me. It goes to the actual attacker. So that's to create the exact email address. Or I can create a domain, and, you know, if, for example, it is Eskom, for example, I can change the O to a italic or to a 0, for example, and go and try and register that domain. All right. And obviously that email will come to me. But SMSs can be spoofed. WhatsApps can be spoofed. Telephone calls can be spoofed. So there are services that we've got access to, for example, where I can put your number in, I can call you, and when the telephone rings, it will say it's your wife or it's your father or your mother that's calling you. So then the ID, call ID will come up, and when you answer it, it's me. All right. These are all used as part of the attack to make it more believable. And oftentimes you can see a blended attack happening where an email gets sent to you to say, please make a payment to the following thing. You're a bit suspicious, but then you get a missed call from that person's number. And then the person sends another email to say, I tried to phone you. Did you get my call? Why are you not answering my call? Or why are you not actioning my email? This is urgent. You've got 2 levels of validation. 1, an email. 2nd, either an SMS or a phone call. 2-factor authentication in your mind, and you do it. All right. So very, very dangerous. The other thing now is in terms of spyware and tracking, we're starting to see quite dangerous, and I've played around with a couple of these spyware tools that you load onto a person's phone or to their computer, and from a monitoring station, you can see everything, folks, from emails to photographs to every type of chat message, even obviously track them in terms of GPS locations. And also what you're starting to see happening out there is people are using tracking devices to track people as well. So, you know, Apple's got the AirTags, for example. You could slip this into a person's bag, put them into a car. And whilst, you know, these companies are going the route of actually, you know, if you're an Apple phone, if I put a tracking device on your person, on your bag or something, if you've got an Apple phone, it will warn you after, I think it's about 48 hours to say there is a tracking device. Are you aware of it? But if you're on an Android device, for example, it's not going to notify you. All right. So all kinds of things like that people need to be aware of. All right. So yeah, that's really something that is used to assist in terms of gathering information or you know, adding on to your target. In terms of performing deeper analysis on your victim, so once you've identified, maybe you're targeting a company, a small company, or a family of people, then you want to do deeper analysis and reconnaissance on your target, all right? And yes, you can go onto Facebook and you can search and try and find things, and you're going to get a fair amount of information. But there are tools in industry, what we call OSINT, open source intelligence gathering. And for example, you can go, so this is a website, OSINT framework. Each of these little blocks is an actual tool or a website that you can use. So if I'm wanting to gather deeper intel on someone on Facebook, I can go here, click on search or analytics, for example, and there's all these different services that give you deeper insight into someone's Facebook profile, or on Twitter, for example, that gives you, you know, gives you patterns and all kinds of other things that you can track, for example. Or for example, if you've got access to a person's photo, I don't know if you've seen the amount of information you can get off a photograph, the metadata that's stored in a digital photo. It's actually scary, all right, including geo IP location information, all right? So there's that element as well. And there's all kinds of other tools. I mean, one is a locally made tool that is used by intelligence law enforcement agencies around the world, something called Martigo that we use as well, where you can literally drag an email address on there, or a domain, or a telephone number, for example, and this thing goes out and you do different drill downs to find more information, or that email address was used somewhere else, for example. So anything digital leaves a footprint out there that provides more insight, all right? And that's typically how it's done. So there's plenty of tools to help you in terms of doing reconnaissance on your target victim. And so once again, this speaks to, in terms of your own personal life, is just to be savvy in terms of your digital footprint, what you're putting out there in terms of social media, etc. To, you know, you want to try and restrict as much as possible what you share in terms of security and privacy. And then finally, you know, obviously launching an attack. And once again, there's a plethora of tools that are out there. Tools like Kali Linux, for example, that have got huge amounts of different tools under different categories. You know, if you're wanting to target your victim and you found out, Tony made a joke earlier about Methodists, the time, etc., but maybe your victim is a Christian, or maybe your victim is a Muslim, for example. You know, just under password attacks, you can go and download databases of, maybe it's a Christian or a Muslim dating site, for example, usernames and typical passwords that say Muslims may use, all right? And oftentimes it's going to be linked, the password will be linked to the Quran or the Bible as a Christian, all right? So, you know, those password attacks increase the probability of you cracking that target person's account, for example. So whether it's Kali Linux, whether it's Parrot CyberSec, for example, I mean, they've even got something there, for example, around automotive tools in terms of hacking. And all of these are used as part of the kill chain attack, right? We've only talked about the first phase, which is very much the reconnaissance phase, and started now talking about the weaponization, delivery, exploitation, installation, command and control, and exfiltration. And you also get counter forensics tools, which they call counter forensics, to clean your tracks so that you're not picked up, that are all either free of charge or quite cost effective that you can download and use. You know, and any criminal now, once you've got your business plan in place, once you've got how you want to monetize it, you're going to need a database to send it out to. So where am I going to get a database of people? Unfortunately, we are all sitting, our information is sitting out there, whether it's South African breaches or global breaches out there, all right? And there's huge amounts of databases of people's confidential information sitting out there. So, you know, there's no shortage of finding your target databases, all right? And, you know, you're either going to do a shotgun approach or you're going to do a targeted attack that requires more reconnaissance. Yeah, by the way, is just something which I'll share, which was sent to me a few weeks ago, or a few days ago, actually, on 19th of September. And yeah, for example, this is a shotgun approach, all right? Hoping that someone's going to fall for this. Oftentimes they might put a username or a password that I might have used on a site, for example, but yeah, they're taking a chance and saying that, you know, that they've installed a Trojan on my computer, and that I love to go and visit adult sites, for example. I'm looking at these sites. They've taken control of my computer and my screen, for example, and they've got me doing things. They're going to very, very graphic details in terms of what they're saying I'm doing, for example. And yeah, it's a business. And in order for me to make the pain go away, please pay me this amount over here, all right, in Bitcoin, and here's their Bitcoin wallet, for example, etc. So, you know, if only 1% of the target audience of, you know, 500,000 people pays, or even a smaller percentage, these guys are making substantial money. If all of this is too much work for you to try and figure these tools out yourself and do that, of course, there's platform as a service, or, you know, software as a service for us in terms of business. There's crime as a service as well, where there are very clever developers developing very sophisticated tools, hosting platforms, for example, that can be used as affiliates. So as an example, here's an example of a dashboard that can get used if you want to launch a ransomware attack. You don't have to think about it. You can go and use this as a software service, and you're an affiliate, and you pay the developer 30% of the fee, as an example. Or here's a denial of service platform that you can use to take out your competitors, as an example. All right, so there's all these services, crime as a service, and then of course, with a reference back to the dark web, there's physical crime as a service as well. The challenge with these things is you don't know if they're just a con site, or if it's a real site, or if it's an FBI, CIA entrapment site, for example. But you know, the reality is these things are quite scary if what they are talking about is there's a price in terms of assassination, there's a price in terms of an acid attack or torture, for example, or just scaring someone, etc. We obviously know in South Africa you could probably get a discount on these prices by going around the corner, speaking to someone there as well, which is another topic for another day. But there's all these other kinds of horrible service as well, things like the red rooms, for example, that are created, often with links to child trafficking, women trafficking, etc. as well, where you can spectate, or you can be the actual commander and dictate what happens to the victims, for example. And you'll see that these two things talk about high fidelity sound is included in the stream as well, so you can hear the victim screaming. Or, you know, also linked to trafficking, for example, is the Cannibal Cafe, for example. And yeah, they talk about livestock, and they talk about available livestock and cattle training. And of course, by livestock and cattle, they're not referring to cattle, they're referring to people. Okay, so you know, as bad as the internet is, the dark web, there's zero regulation. It's the wild west of things that are out there. And of course, the dark web is also being used in terms of cybercrime, where there's a number of rooms available where if you are an IT person or an admin person, you know, and people are selling access to various services, making extra money on the side. These things are happening out there as well. Okay, so that was just I'll come back at the very last, just in terms of guidance, in terms of recommendations to make yourself a bit safer, or make your families a bit safer. But I think that just, I think, gives you a bit of an overview of what we're seeing happening here in cybercrime. All right. In terms of the last portion, screen time. This has been probably one of the most challenging things my wife and I have experienced in terms of raising our kids. When we started, we talked about 3 cubs. I've got a 28-year-old daughter who missed a lot of this from a previous marriage. My current wife of 21 years, we've got a 16-year-old and a boy, and a 15-year-old girl. And boy, oh boy, this has been the challenge. And I'm sure many of you that have got, whether it's a 3-year-old or a teenager, device time becomes a problem. Okay, so here's some things. Let's just quickly unpack some things. So now I'm going to be 52 in a few weeks' time. In my day, screen time was, if you were lucky, going to a drive-in, or in the olden days, putting up a white sheet on your wall and hiring a projector, or going to hire a Betamax or a VHS from the video store and watching videos and taking it back the next day. In terms of game time, for example, I would love, growing up on a farm, I never had access to all these things in Mpumalanga, but you know, when I would go and visit my family up in Joburg, going to arcades with a pocket full of 20 cents, and then ultimately, you know, Ataris came out for home things and all of that. I always wished I could have one of those things. And here's where things went badly wrong, when they started combining games onto handheld devices. Okay, that's where the real problem started, okay, in terms of gaming and things like that. And of course, we know nowadays that there's very, very powerful phones that have got access to huge amounts of capability. You can basically run most of your office on your phone nowadays. And of course, we know that gaming is taking a whole new leap and bounds. I don't know if you guys know, but the gaming industry is actually overtaken the music and the film industry in terms of revenue. It's a massive beast in terms of how much money is being generated, and where gaming is going to be going in the very near future in terms of virtual reality, etc. as well. So I think this is kind of a quick drive through history in terms of where we are in terms of screen time. Screen time, though, it has become incredibly addictive. All right. And interestingly enough, this is a study done by the Center for Disease Control. Okay, it's interesting that the CDC would do this study, but they've basically analyzed screen time for ages 8 to 10, 11 to 14, and 15 to 18. And maybe in your own mind, just try and think which category of people would have the most screen time. I actually was leaning more towards the 15 to 18-year-olds. I'll quickly just pop it up for you, but you can see that 8 to 10-year-olds typically spend 6 hours a day. 15 to 18-year-olds spend 7.5 hours a day. And the 11 to 14-year-olds, so my teenage daughter, spends up to 9 hours a day of time on screens. Okay, and there's websites you can go and have a look at, and all of those things. Of course, the damage that gets caused by spending too much time on screens is very, very substantial. All right, so I'll unpack that for you just now. But when we talk about screen time, all right, I broadly break it up into 4 different categories: S, G, M, E, and let me unpack it for you. So the S stands for social media. All right, I'm aiming this mostly at teenagers, but we can all be guilty of spending too much time and being distracted by screens. So the same applies to us as adults, and the same applies to us in terms of health benefits or health punishments at the end of the day as well. So in terms of social media, for example, all right, we've got, I just want to get I seem to have lost my pen. There we go. Okay, so there's various apps. What we're finding with teenagers are typically using, even though WhatsApp's used by adults mostly, most kids are still using WhatsApp in terms of chats, but obviously things like Snapchat and Telegram, etc., are becoming more and more popular. In terms of media sharing, Instagram, TikTok. Folks, if you take one thing away from this, TikTok is probably the most toxic app that your child can have on their phone. Go and do your research and watch various videos on TikTok. And what's happening with TikTok and the algorithms for TikTok, etc. It's actually mind-blowing. All right. Very, very highly addictive and very destructive app. In terms of microblogging, Twitter, Tumblr, for example. And then, of course, there's hundreds of dating apps that are out there. Mostly these are actually for over 18s, but we all know kids are adventurous, and kids as young as 13-year-old are using these apps, whether it's Tinder or Grindr. Or no, instead of, if it's too much hassle to swipe left to swipe right, and you are wanting hookups, if you purely wanting sex, you know, there's Just Sex and a whole range of other sites in that as well, okay, available out there. So a large amount of time gets spent on social media. It always amazes me when you have kids coming to play together and they're also together on devices in the same room, typing away. We always obviously go and chase them out to go and play outside. The second is gaming and streaming. Okay, so a big chunk of time gets spent on the gaming side of things. And of course, remember, gaming now, it's not just on your console, on your PC. The mobile / tablet thing is massive, and that's obviously where a large portion of the revenues get generated as well. Various gaming streaming services, Steam, GOG, Xbox, Epic, etc. There's a massive range of these where you pay a monthly fee for some of these, and you can download as much as you want and use. And then, of course, there's gaming streaming services. For example, Discord is very, very popular, Twitch, Caffeine, etc. Okay, so games nowadays are not just played in isolation. You'll see your kids playing with headphones on and chatting to all kinds of people. My son and I have a very open relationship. You know, when he was heavy into his gaming a few years ago, before he got heavy into his gym, etc., he would share with me what was being discussed in these forums. Very hardcore racism, swearing, all kinds of things that get shared with people that you're playing with, etc. People do it to irritate people, etc. as well. So they be as horrific as they can online. So just bear that in mind. And of course, also with gaming, you know, a lot of the games that have been created are not created for kids. They're actually created for adults. It's got pretty hardcore content, swearing, adult content, all right? Typically, if you look at the IITPSA guidelines, you'll see that they 18 SVG, you know, all kinds of labels attached to them as well. A big chunk of time gets spent on movies and music, and I'm sure we can all relate to that in terms of Netflix and Disney. I think we're all guilty in terms of that. I'm a big Spotify fan. Actually watching the Spotify movie on Netflix on how Spotify was created. Okay, so there's a whole range of things there. And of course, education / work. From a work point of view, most of our work is still done very, very much remote. So, you know, in terms of me spending device time in a lot of meetings that's behind my computer, emails, browsing, never ending, etc. Even driving to meetings, always have an audiobook playing or something, or walking the dogs, I've got audiobooks playing in terms of education, etc. So our worlds revolve very much around device time, okay, and it's always a battle to try and manage that. And really, you know, you go and have a look at the effects of too much device time. And folks, I don't know if you're seeing it with teenagers that you're dealing with. I alluded earlier to suicides, but it almost seems to be very fashionable in terms of teenagers being drawn to drama, being drawn to stress, medication, self-harm, all kinds of other things coming out of that, as well as affecting your academic performance and social issues. A lot of anxiety and depression being put onto people, okay? So that's from a psychological point of view. But of course, headaches, eye strain, you know, poor sleep quality. And this is something we've got to watch with blue screening, etc., blurry vision, etc. as well, all right? And there's, of course, longer-term consequences and all kinds of other things that can go wrong. Imagine trying to enforce this in terms of the daily screen recommendations, you know, 1 hour, you know, 2 hours for that age group over there. Quite hard to do realistically. My guidance to you as caregivers is, and this is speaking from experience, and I don't have all the answers, but what I have seen, and also as part of the research we did for the school project as well, is we really need a mindset change. You know, the equation where I gave about living on a farm, it's very different to today's kids, what they are involved in. We've got to continue. One thing I hear adults, parents often saying is, oh, I don't understand, it's too technical for me, I just leave it to them to understand. You cannot adopt that attitude at all. You have to become more hands-on in terms of technology. All right, so you cannot use that excuse at all. We've got to use our device time as negotiation tools. You cannot just give a kid a device and say, off you go and, you know, have fun. I touched on some of the cybercrime, I touched on some of the dark web elements. There's all kinds of other things happening out there. We have to put in place time limits and boundaries. We've got to make sure age-appropriate apps, content, games, even mobile apps as well. Watch out for that as well. Trust but validate, use tech tools to help you manage. I'll show you how to do that just now. And then incentivize and discipline. I shouldn't say it in a public forum, but I can't remember the last time my kids got a good old puck slide. We use device time to punish in terms of that and other things as well. So, and then this is not going to be a quick thing. One very key thing is, please make sure that you pay an interest to your kids. To you, the game they're playing might not be interesting at all. And when they come to tell you about something or show you something, you might shrug them off. Don't do that. It's very, very important to them. You know, kids at the end of the day, I don't want to go into the dirty nitty-gritty details, but someone very close to us as a Wolfpack family, their teenager actually committed suicide. They were 13 years old because of a game where they lost this game and they were responsible for dropping the clan, for example. They take this very, very seriously, okay? Make sure you've got no device days, no device, have the odd meal here and there with no devices on. Make sure you're charging your phones in separate locations. Don't have your phone next to your bed. That goes for us as adults as well, all right? So don't be like the father smoking and saying to kids, you don't smoke. You know, we've got to really lead by example, okay? Some of the free tools, you know, I've tried a lot of different tools, paid tools, free tools, etc. At the end of the day, I often revert back to if our kids have got hand-me-down Apple devices using screen time or, you know, family link on the Google things, there's links to them. Actually very, very powerful, but they're only going to manage one element. Remember, if your kids have got multiple devices, you need a bigger solution, all right? So there's a number of these parental solutions out there. I've personally tried Custodia and Kaspersky Safe Kids, for example. They're not perfect, but you know, they can lock down a phone, a tablet, a computer, etc. Your consoles are always a challenge, etc. But there's always ways and means around that as well by doing something on your router. But it becomes this ongoing battle, tug of war of locking things down, and then your kids need WhatsApp to be able to call you if there's an emergency, or you're such a horrible parent. It's this whole emotional roller coaster thing. That's why the previous screen I talked about is probably the most important one in terms of thinking about and using it as a negotiation tactic. It's a matter of give and take, all right, and reward and punishment. So there's a couple of tools. You can go and have a look at the link and try them out yourself. Some other little things just to mention to you. Most people don't have it enabled on your phone and tablets that you give your children. It helps to enable safe search, okay? Because kids can do either on purpose or accidental searches. A kid searching on sausage. My youngster very innocently searched the word threesome when he was looking for, it was a threesome. I can't remember which soccer team it was, but it was these three players that were called something threesome. And he almost fell off his chair when we saw the results that came back from that. So, of course, Safe Search will protect, and it's a free, just enabling it. And then also, if you've got younger kids, you can make Kiddle, which is a Google safe search engine, the default search engine for kiddies as well. Okay, so there's a couple of things that you can do there in terms of safe searching. The one little thing just before I close off, be very careful, and this is now referring to our home environment. We rush out, we buy a smart TV, a baby monitor, etc. And we deploy it and we quickly skip past those little, you know, do you want to set a password or do you want to put some sort of security on it? Because we think no one's going to be able to see this thing. And I trust my neighbors. So what's the threat? And I want convenience over anything else. I normally would do this as a physical demo and show people, but in a talk like this, I'll just quickly talk you through it. So, for example, if you go and deploy, if you go to Macro or wherever, or take a lot, you buy a CCTV camera kit that you want to deploy on either get a company or you just, you know, DIY. You can deploy this thing to provide you protection and security, right? Now I've got a camera system at home, and I love the fact that I can, from my phone, see what's going on. Sometimes when I'm traveling, I would click on the camera and just have a look at the dogs running around or whatever, the outside things. But one thing you must remember, any piece of technology that you deploy that's got an internet connection, whether it's your fridge light bulb or your CCTV system, can be picked up by anyone in the world, okay? So there's various tools. So for example, I would use a tool like Shodan. Now Shodan picks up devices. Shodan can find databases, for example. Here I did a search string on a particular type of camera, and I narrowed the search down to country ZA. you know, and it found 806 devices in South Africa. You can open up a map and you can actually drill down, right down to street level, for example. And all you got to do is click on this little red button over here. All right. And that actually takes you to this over here, which is the actual admin interface. And people often take shortcuts. Normally, when I do a demonstration and I open up 3 different windows, they use the password or the username admin. I don't even type in password. I just click the login button. Normally, 1 out of 3 people, camera systems, I can just click and connect straight to. And you've got access to the back end system of that camera. You can, you know, change anything you want to, but most importantly, you can monitor what's going on in the environment as well. So quite creepy, but bear that in mind. I use it as a little bit of a shock tactic just to make people think that, you know, don't just think that your neighbors on the Wi-Fi that can jump onto you. Anyone in the world can, if they know what they're doing, or they watch a few videos, can do that as well. So last slide to end off, I think just in terms of guidance, really create a little acronym called PUSH. You know, as crime is pushing us, we've got to push back, and PUSH is really an acronym for passwords. Really, passwords, even though they've been around for so long, people, this is still one of the weakest links. And, you know, we normally use the Smarties in terms of passwords when we're giving out messages. You know, Smarties, for example, they're hard on the outside, soft on the inside, multiple colors, for example. There's typically 2 layers in there. It's the candy and it's the chocolates. Really create strong passwords. Don't have an English word, a dictionary word anywhere in your password. Maybe revert to Afrikaans or Zulu, for example, and use at least 15 characters long, for example. Use obviously different, you know, characters and numbers, etc. But that's important, and don't have the same password on different sites. Okay. And what we normally recommend is using a password manager like a LastPass or a KeyPass to track 98% of your passwords. I've got 250 passwords for whatever reason. And I use probably about a 20-character password for my LastPass. But all your applications that you're using, from your social media, your cloud storage, everything, you have to enable multi-factor authentication. 2-factor authentication with an SMS or with an app. You have to do that. That's critical. All right. And in my LastPass, for example, I have the majority of my passwords, and I remember, you know, my personal banking, business banking, another sensitive site, and my LastPass. So at my old age, I've got to remember 4 passwords, and I use LastPass. I'll tell it to create a 100-character password, for example, if I want to. I don't have to remember it. So for me, that's fine. Passwords, the U is updates. Please update your phone, tablet, computer. Don't just update your core operating software. If you're running a browser with different plugins, Adobe, all of these things have to be updated, okay, on a daily, weekly basis. S is scrutinize. Often criminals will use urgency in terms of attack, give you an instruction to do something, otherwise your access is going to get cut, etc. Scrutinize communications. If you're suspicious about something, remember that thing I showed you where phone calls, SMSs can be spoofed. Rather phone the person back or use another means of communication to validate that you. We've actually had companies target us now in terms of changing, sending to our finance person to change, pretending to be the employees or contractors to change their banking systems. We've had 3 cases in the last few months now. Harden your security at home, Wi-Fi devices, apps. So tighten up security, tighten up your privacy settings, etc. And I think the last thing really is all about common sense. Sounds too good to be true. Your gut's often going to tell you something is not right. Something's not right about this person or this person that I'm chatting to. It doesn't feel right. Go with your gut. Folks, I've gone over time by 2 minutes. So that's my talk for the day. I thank you for that. And I'm happy to stay on if there are any questions or comments. So thank you. I'm going to pause for now.
Craig, I just see one question on the comments. Freedom of speech versus hosting unethical content. Where do we draw the legal line? And then a question about TikTok having safer content in China than the rest of the world. If you have any comments on that?
Yeah. So where do we draw the line? Depending on the country you're in, the laws of the land take preference in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed. South Africa, we've got the new Cybercrimes Act, which is pretty good. It's quite explicit in terms of going into detail, in terms of what's allowed and what's not allowed, and in terms of punishments for that. A great site that I often use is a site called Terms of Service Did Not Read.org. It's a non-profit company that looks at you can go in there and do a search on Facebook, TikTok, and it actually unpacks their terms and conditions, and it tells you what you're actually agreeing to when you sign up to use that service as well. You know, that's also something. The last point around freedom of speech, etc. Yeah, it's a tricky one, because on the one hand, we want to have civil rights and freedom of speech. On the other hand, you get a lot of dodgy sites that take advantage of that. At the end of the day, I think there needs to be rules aimed specifically at children who are, they might be tech savvy, but they are very ignorant when it comes to understanding what the risk is. They need to be protected. And in my mind, that would take preference. But yeah, it's a good topic to discuss and debate.
Thanks, Craig. I see a question around password managers. How safe are they? And then also a reference to password holders. I'm sure like AppSecure, MSecure, I'm sure it's the same thing. So how safe would you say password managers are?
Look, everything gets hacked at the end of the day. I mean, I use LastPass. LastPass has been hacked, although they didn't get right through to the salt and everything. That's why you don't put all your eggs in one basket. So I use it to manage the non-essential passwords, and I still use my noggin to remember those. But the danger, of course, and those people that have unfortunately lost their crypto wallets where they've forgotten their passwords and they've lost millions and millions of dollars, they always say don't write your passwords down, but sometimes you actually have to write them down in a sensitive way, you know, write them down and put it where no one's going to find it at the end of the day, but at least have a plan B of something that you can revert to, because yeah, human error is also a risk.
See lots of positive feedback from the community saying they're enjoying it. They would like to get access to the recording and the presentation. Then there was a question earlier on around where does AI fit into cybersecurity defense strategies that mitigate human vulnerabilities linked to levels of empathy, trust, and cybersecurity literacy?
Yeah, so AI is the big one to watch. You know, AI, any tool is going to be used for good and for bad. So you're going to have AI being used by defenders to monitor things, to give you updates a lot quicker than the human mind or human eyes can do. But the criminals are going to be using AI as well against us. So it's this continuous arms race. And, you know, it's always much harder being the good guys. We've got to play by the rules. The bad guys don't have to at all. So I'm more concerned about AI when it comes to military applications. If you look at what guys like Elon Musk and that are saying, you know, we are slowly building up, and there's some scary videos out there about AI taking over the world. Yeah, that's going to be the big concern for me as well.
Just on the AI, I know that there's deep fakes coming out with videos, which are also linked to fake news, worries me tremendously. I think, Craig, if you want to put any closing comments, we can maybe then close. And then, but I want to just appeal to everyone and say thank you for everyone for attending. Thank you so much for Craig for contributing, presenting. If there's any questions, Craig, send an email. If you want to reach out to Craig, his email should have been on the presentation, or we can make it available. So Craig, final words up to you, and then we can close.
Yeah, look, we'll send out the slides to you guys. If there's any questions, just quickly over there, you can fire it off to info@Wolfpack-Risk. That email does come to me and a couple of other people as well. Or you can just put Craig, C-R-A-I-G, at Wolfpack-Risk. That comes directly to me. We have got a small team under Alert Africa that does the investigations as well. So if you've got anything sensitive, maybe just send it to Craig at Wolfpack-Risk, and I will get the team at Alert Africa to look at your case and to assist in terms of investigations. And as I said, for those of you that joined a bit late, Alert Africa is our community initiative. We don't charge for that. But in closing, be safe, guys. We work very hard in terms of raising our children. We work hard to save money and put money into different vehicles that are going to hopefully take care of us one day. You can really lose your nest egg at one click. I promise you, we've really seen horrible cases and put your life under a lot of stress in terms of things that can go wrong. So really, prevention is the best method. Just be very, very safe. Share this with people. You never know whose life or whose money you can end up saving one day. Okay, that's it from our side. Thanks, guys.
Hey, Gary.